So today we're looking at effective or comparison rates of interest on loans. Now, you've heard the term effective interest rate before, haven't you? Do you remember?
Yes.
Yep, do you remember what that was?
No.
That was where we took into account like the compounding and changed the interest rate to suit like if it was just a flat rate per year that didn't compound. We'll need to recap that for later. This one's a little bit different in that it takes into account the fees on loans. So I will explain. So obviously you want a bit of a heading. Woo. So the lowest interest rate offered on a loan is not necessarily the cheapest long-term option because we have to take into account the fees that are charged. So banks are usually required to state a comparison rate to consumers. And so this is where you get to learn what the comparison rate is. And we call it the effective rate of a loan. So I'd copy those two. So the comparison rate on a loan is going to be different sort of to the effective interest rate that's given on other things. So, yeah. So, to define the effective rate of a loan, it is the nominal interest rate plus fees and charges over the life of the loan. Now, pro rata means on average or something like that. So, it's taking into account the fees like averaged over the length of the loan instead of just at the start of the loan. So the fees accrued over the life of the loan are added to the principal at the setup of the loan before the effective interest is calculated. So the effective interest rate can then be used to compare loans that are offered with different fee structures and different interest rates. So I would get this one too. So that means if, some bank is like, yeah, we're going to charge you an account fee of $6 every month for the entire duration of the loan. And then there's this other people who are like, yeah, our monthly fee is only $4, but there's a $600 establishment fee at the start of the loan. Then these things are taken into account so that you can determine which one's kind of better. Does that make sense? You'll see what I mean later. Okay, so the example is to calculate the effective rate on interest on a loan of $50,000 over 10 years for 3 different options, all right? Some of them easier than others, but they all tend to follow the same process, which is nice. So let's make some space to do it. Okay, so starting with option 1, okay. This is the one where it's pretty easy. We have 8.5% per annum charged monthly with no setup or monthly fees, okay. So because there's no setup or monthly fees, that means that there's no need to compare the effective interest rate. Does that make sense? So therefore, the effective interest rate is just your 8.5% per annum. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. If there's no fees, your job's half done for you. All right. Yep. Okay. So option 2 is where we get to start looking into it. Okay. So step 1 is all the pro rata adding stuff. So we need to calculate the fees and add it onto our initial amount. So the P of V plus the fees is going to equal our 50,000. Now, what are our fees in option 2? $4 per month. So what's that going to be?
480.
Okay, cool. So timesing by 12 and timesing by 10, which is going to equal 480 as Seth tells us. Okay, the 12 is for the months and the 10 is for the years. And so when we add that, we get 50,480. Probably should have done this one on a new slide, but it'll be okay. Might do it over here a bit. So the next step we have is to organise one of our little lists. Something happened to my wire there. Alright, so what is our N? 12 times 10, which is 120. What's our I? 8.25. Our present value is where it's a bit different. Instead of having just the 50,000, we're going to have the 480 included in there as well. Does that make sense? So this is the key kind of trick to this. Our idea initially, because there's a few steps to each question, our initial idea is to find what the monthly rate would be if it was 50,480 instead of 50,000. Does that make sense? So that's step 1. Our future value, any guesses? We're working with loans. What happens with loans? 0. What else happens with loans? Remember beginning or end? End. So remember that you definitely want to keep having it set up on that one for these questions. And our P of Y and C of Y, monthly, isn't it? So that's going to be 12 and 12. Okay? So then we throw that into our calculator and work out what PMT is, which we're also awesome at using our TVM solver these days. And it's set up on end, so that's good. So 120, 8.25, 50,480, 0, 12, and 12. So then we're finding our PMT, which is F4. And we get, so our payments per month is $619.15. Now it seems in these questions, you know how we were talking the other day about always rounding it up 1? If it has a 0 next to it, they don't tend to. Does that make sense? I figure that's small enough that it's not a real issue. Is that what it says in the textbook? It's just 15? I don't have one in front of me. Yep. All right. So then our next step, and I'm going to, should I squish it? No, I'll go to the next page. Okay, so we're continuing with option 2. Don't delete anything out of your calculator because you need it. We're still going with option 2. Okay, so remember we just found that our payments per month, taking into account the 480, is $619.15 or whatever it was. So now we have to actually work out what our effective interest rate is. Does that make sense? So we're changing to this time we're finding I as our question mark.
Why is it so hard?
So our next step is to find the I using pretty much all of the same information as we had before, with just a couple of changes. So what's the next one? PMT.
My apologies. I went to get the milk and they turned.
Oh, did they?
While I was gone.
Yeah, probably. Sneaky kids who want really bad hearing when they're old. Okay, so in this case, that P has just gone really messed up. Alright, so in this case, we're leaving the sort of indications of time and stuff the same. Okay, I is what we're finding. Our future value is still going to be 0. We've swapped our PMT, and you don't have to change it because it's already in there. So it'll be 619.15, and then all of the zeros and other decimal places. That's completely fine. And the difference here, that instead of doing the 50,480, we're going to just put in the 50,000 because we're trying to find the interest rate that's taking into account these actual like higher payments. So it kind of sorts itself out. Obviously, we're still on end. And so we go back into our PMT and change those couple of things. So changing the 50,000. And nope, we just changed that one thing even, which makes it easier than necessary. And then F2. And we get an interest rate of 8.47%. Note that that's the effective interest. You with me? With me? Good. All right. So if we look at option 3, do you remember what the first step was? Because there's 3 main steps to this process. Yep. So our P of V, so 50,000. Plus what? Fees. So what are our fees in this case for option 3? 300 and 8 per month. So timesing by 12 and timesing by 10. What does that equal? Usually I would give that a title too, by the way.
Do you actually know the answer?
Alright. Cool. Alright. Do you remember what the second step is? Yes, we're going to do our list. Why are we doing this list, guys? Can we come up with a reason in words? Because my aim is to make sure that you understand why we're doing this. Alright, so we're going to explain it again. So in this case, we are using the 51,260. Can anyone remember why?
Because we want to find out the payments.
Yeah. We first want to find out the payments per month with that raised loan amount, so that then we can find what the effective interest rate is later. Okay, so thus our PMT is our question mark. The cool thing about this is in these questions, they're all going to be monthly, like usually, or if they are something different, all of the questions are going to do the different things, I think, so we don't have to take that into account. And it's just going to be our 120 again. And our I is 8%. So, nope, I'm putting that in the wrong spot. What am I doing? Why aren't you guys correcting me? I've forgotten about the 0. Alright, so exit and go back into your PMT. Have you guys worked that out, that you can just press exit instead of like going back to the main menu and going to good?
Yeah.
Just double checking. All right, so 120 interest is just 8, so we're going to change that. 51 to 60. That's our question mark, 0, 12 and 12. So PMT. All right, so our payments become 621.93. But we're going to just kind of, when we write it down, the answer, we're probably going to round it. But when we're doing our calculations, we'll just leave all of the decimals in there because it's more accurate. All right, what's the next step?
The list.
The list again. What's the key changes to this list?
Just 50,000 instead.
And I, we're trying to find I.
Yep. So we're trying to find I. Our P of V is going to be the 50,000 because we're swapping that. And N is staying at 120. Alright, so throw that into the calculator. Note the key changes. This one, so that we can thus find this one. Yeah. Whereas before we had to find that one first in order to do it. So exit. Because we're trying to find the effective interest rate taking into account the fees on the loan, which there's lots of hidden costs when you take out loans. Alright, so I have to... Technically that should be like effective interest rate. 8.57%. Have we finished? No, what do we have to do?
Rank the options.
We have to rank the options. Obviously, in your books, I would expect this to be in a list. Right? But, like, actually be like, the best option is option 1. The best option is, you know, like... Or you can write it shorter than that, but yeah. But on here, I'm just going to indicate with numbers. So which one is our best option? Because do you remember what our options are? We've got that one. That one was the outright one. This one and this one. Option 2 is number 1. All right. Yeah. Then option 1 is number 2. And option 3 is number 3. Because it's 8.57%. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So clearly, if we were taking out a loan, we would obviously want to go for the one that's $4 per month against the one that's $8 per month and the fee of $300. That was always going to be bad. Can you? Technically, you can get loans from other banks that you're not with, but there are banks that would prefer for you to be with them for 6 months or something. Before, depends on the bank and their rules and processes. It's a good question. Their policies, that's right. Everyone's got that? Cool. So, some steps for doing this if you're likely to forget. So it, could be added to your cheat sheet. Are, for each loan option, firstly, add the loan amount and the fees. Secondly, calculate PMT using the answer to 1 as your present value. 3, calculate I using the PMT from part 2 and the original loan amount, i.e. without the fees added. And then 4, state which option is best. So that might be something that you want to copy down and add on to your cheat sheet. So we're doing exercise 2D.5 on page 118, questions 1, 3, 5 and 6.